So there's this thing that happens when you've lived in the same town your whole life, you stop expecting anything to change. The gas station on Route 9 still has the same flickering E in its sign. The diner still serves breakfast until 2. And for 4 years my Tuesdays looked exactly the same. Work at the hardware store until 5, dinner at Theo's place because his mom always made too much food, and then the two of us sitting on his back porch doing absolutely nothing, which somehow never got boring. I want to be clear about something before I go further. This isn't a story about love at first sight. I didn't fall for Gabriel the second he walked back through that door. If anything, the first thing I felt was annoyed, which I know sounds like a strange way to start something like this, but stay with me because it gets complicated fast, and I think complicated is more honest than magic. Gabriel is Theo's older brother, 8 years older than us, which meant that when we were 14 and he was 22, he existed in this separate orbit: car keys, a job, a girlfriend who wore perfume that lingered in the hallway. He left for Denver when I was 16. Some kind of foreman position, good money, and nobody talked about him much after that except Theo's mom, who kept his old room exactly the way he left it, like a museum exhibit nobody visits. 4 years, that's how long he was gone, long enough that I'd built an entire version of my life that didn't include him at all. Then on a random Tuesday, not a birthday, not a holiday, nothing special about the date, I walked into Theo's kitchen and there was a stranger's jacket hung over the back of a chair. Work boots by the door, the kind with actual wear on them, not the kind you buy to look like you work outside. And Theo's mom was crying into a dish towel in a way that made my stomach drop, because for one horrible second I thought something bad had happened. "He's back," she said before I could even ask. He's back," like she needed to say it twice to believe it. I remember standing there holding a six-pack of root beer like an idiot, not sure if I was supposed to leave. Then he walked in from the hallway, and I want to describe this honestly without making it sound like a movie because it wasn't. He looked tired. Not tired like he needed sleep, tired like something had worn him down over 4 years and he hadn't fully recovered from it. He'd put on some weight in a good way, broader through the shoulders. His hair was longer than I remembered, pushed back like he hadn't bothered with it in a while. He looked at me and there was this pause, maybe 2 full seconds, where I genuinely don't think he knew who I was. "Wait," he said slowly. "Milo, is that no way?" "Yeah," I said, which is a stupid thing to say, but it's what came out. "You were like this tall." He held his hand out flat around his own chest. "What happened to you?" "4 years happened," I said, and he laughed, this short surprised laugh like he hadn't expected me to have a personality yet. That was it, that was the whole reunion. No swelling music, no charged eye contact. Just a guy coming home and being weirdly startled that his little brother's friend had grown up. I went home that night and told my mom about it over dinner in about 4 sentences because that's genuinely how insignificant it felt. It didn't stay insignificant for long. Because here's the thing nobody warns you about: when someone leaves and comes back, they don't slot back into the shape they left behind. Gabriel came back different in ways that took weeks to notice, and once I started noticing, I couldn't stop. He was quieter than I remembered. Not shy, just careful, like he was choosing his words instead of just talking. Theo told me one night, half annoyed, that Gabriel wouldn't say much about Denver, wouldn't explain why he'd come back so suddenly, wouldn't even unpack most of his boxes. "It's like he left something there," Theo said, picking at the label on his beer bottle, "and won't talk about what." I didn't think much of it. Why would I? He was 26, a grown man with a whole life I knew nothing about, and I was 22, still figuring out how to pay a phone bill on time. There was no reason for our lives to intersect beyond Tuesday dinners. Except he started showing up to Tuesday dinners. At first I assumed it was just home, family, makes sense. But then it became every Tuesday, and he'd linger afterward on the porch with Theo and me, not saying much, just there, this quiet presence with a beer he barely drank, watching the two of us talk like he found it more interesting than it deserved to be. One night Theo got a call from his girlfriend and stepped inside, and it was just me and Gabriel on the porch steps, the kind of silence that isn't uncomfortable exactly but isn't nothing either. "You still draw?" he asked out of nowhere. I turned to look at him. "How do you even remember that?" "You used to leave notebooks all over this porch, sketches of, I don't know, buildings and stuff. I used to look through them when you left them behind." He said it so plainly, like it wasn't strange at all that he remembered a detail about a 16-year-old kid from 4 years ago. "You never told me that." "Didn't think it mattered," he shrugged, looking out at the yard instead of at me. "You were good, better than good actually. You still doing it?" I told him yeah, sort of, mostly for a community college class, nothing serious. He asked to see something sometime and I said maybe, and that was it. small talk, except it didn't feel small. It felt like someone had noticed something about me that even I'd forgotten I cared about. I want to skip ahead a little because if I walk you through every single Tuesday, I will be here for actual hours, and I promised myself I'd keep this honest, not exhausting. The shift happened, if I'm being precise about it, on a night in early October, about 6 weeks after he came home. Theo had to bail on dinner because his girlfriend's car broke down 2 towns over and it was just supposed to be me and an empty porch. Except Gabriel texted me. Not called Theo, not asked his mom to pass along a message. Texted me directly, a number I didn't even know he had. Theo Bilade, you still coming? Don't want the food to go to waste. I stood in my kitchen staring at that message longer than I want to admit. I went, of course I went. And it was strange sitting across from him at that table with no buffer, no Theo cracking jokes to fill the silence. Just Gabriel passing me the mashed potatoes and asking real questions, actual questions, not the small talk kind. What I wanted to do with the drawing stuff, whether I liked working at the hardware store or just tolerated it, whether I'd ever thought about leaving town like he had. Did you like Denver? I asked, mostly to redirect the spotlight off me. Something crossed his face, quick, but I caught it. Parts of it, he said, then, after a beat, some of it I'm still figuring out how to leave behind, if I'm honest. I didn't push, I wanted to. Every instinct in me wanted to ask what that meant, but something told me it wasn't mine to pull on yet. So I let it sit there, unopened, and we moved on to easier things. That was the night I noticed how he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Not lingering, not obvious, just present, like he was actually there instead of somewhere else in his head. I hadn't had many people look at me like that. It unsettled me in a way I didn't have language for yet. Weeks passed, little things accumulated. He started remembering how I took my coffee. He'd show up at the hardware store on his lunch break for no real reason, buy something small he clearly didn't need, and hang around the counter talking to me until his break ran out. Theo noticed before I let myself notice. You and my brother are getting weirdly close, he said one afternoon, not accusing, just observing the way you'd comment on the weather. We're just friends, I said way too fast. Theo raised an eyebrow but didn't push it. I remember being relieved and also, somewhere underneath that relief, a small disappointed twist I refused to look at directly. Here's where I have to be honest about the messier parts, because I promised myself this wouldn't be a clean story. I liked girls. I liked guys too, but nobody in my life knew that except one person I'd told in total confidence years earlier, who'd since moved to Ohio and mostly stopped calling. I hadn't figured out yet what to do with that information about myself, hadn't tested it against anything real. So when I started noticing the way my chest tightened whenever Gabriel's truck pulled into the driveway, I did what a lot of people do. I told myself it was nothing. Admiration, nostalgia. The strange comfort of an old family friend paying attention to me. It stopped being nothing on a night in November, cold enough that we sat in his truck instead of the porch heater running, windows fogging slightly at the edges. We'd been talking about nothing, some show he'd started watching, a coworker of mine who kept messing up the register, when he went quiet in that particular way he did before saying something real. Can I tell you something, he said, and you don't make it weird? I make everything weird, can't promise that. He almost laughed, but it didn't quite land. I didn't come back because of a job opportunity. I told my mom that. It's not true. Okay, I said carefully. I was seeing someone in Denver, he said. A guy. It ended badly, like badly enough that I couldn't stay in that city and keep seeing his face on every street corner in my head. He exhaled hard, like the sentence had cost him something to say out loud. Nobody here knows that, not even Theo. I don't know why I'm telling you this. I sat there for a second too long, processing about 4 different things at once. That he'd loved a man, that it had gone wrong enough to uproot his entire life, that he'd chosen out of everyone he knew to tell me. I'm not going to make it weird, I said finally, I promise. He looked at me sideways, something cautious and searching in his face. You sure? And this is the part I still think about, because I could have just nodded and let it stay comfortable and vague. Instead, my mouth just decided things without asking me first. I'm not exactly straight either, I said, so you're safe. The truck went very quiet, not bad quiet, the kind of quiet where the air itself seems to be waiting to see what happens next. I did not expect tonight to go like this, he said eventually, and there was something almost like a laugh in it, disbelief more than humor. Me neither, I admitted. I've literally never said that out loud to anyone who's like in my actual life. Why me? I didn't have a clean answer. I don't know, you just told me something huge, felt wrong to let you sit in that alone. He looked at me for a long moment, longer than felt casual, and something in his expression shifted, softened like a held breath finally let go. Thank you, he said quietly, for not making it weird. Told you I'd try. We didn't talk about it more than that, not that night, but something had cracked open between us, some door that couldn't be shut again even if we'd wanted to. I won't pretend the weeks after were simple. They weren't. There was a strange new tension every time we were alone, not bad tension but charged like static before a storm. We started texting more, nothing dramatic, just constant, threaded through my whole day. Good morning texts, complaints about customers, him sending me pictures of half-finished woodworking projects in his garage, asking my opinion like it actually mattered to him. Theo noticed again, more pointedly this time. Are you into my brother? He asked bluntly one night, no lead-up, no softening. My whole body went cold. What? No, why would you? Milo, I've known you since we were 9, you get this specific voice when you talk about him now, I'm not stupid. I sat there caught, the truth crawling up my throat whether I wanted it to or not. Even if I were, I said slowly, testing the words, would that be a problem for you? Theo was quiet for a second and I braced myself for something bad, some rupture in the one friendship I'd built my whole life around. Honestly, he said, I'd rather it be you than some rando he brings home eventually. At least I know you're not gonna hurt him on purpose. I didn't know what to say to that. It wasn't quite blessing, wasn't quite warning, it was just Theo, blunt and unbothered, handing me something I hadn't realized I needed permission for. There's nothing happening, I said, which was true, technically, in that nothing had happened yet. Theo said, in a tone that made it very clear he didn't buy it and didn't need to. The actual turning point, the moment that changed everything, happened on a night that started completely ordinary and ended in a way I still can't fully explain, even now telling you this. Gabriel had been renovating the garage into a workshop, something to keep his hands busy, he said, though I think it was really something to keep his mind busy. I'd been coming by most evenings, half to help, half because I didn't want to be anywhere he wasn't. We'd fallen into an easy rhythm, him sanding something down, me holding a piece steady, both of us talking about nothing important, which by that point had become the most important part of my week. That night it was raining hard, the kind that hammers on a garage roof loud enough you have to raise your voice to be heard. We'd lost power in the house, so we were working by a couple of battery lanterns, shadows stretched long across the concrete floor. At some point he stopped what he was doing and just looked at me, not the careful sideways glances from before, a full, direct look like he'd made a decision about something. Can I ask you something and you actually answer honestly, he said. Depends on the question. Is this, he gestured vaguely between us, just me, or are you feeling something too? My heart did something complicated and painful in my chest. I could have deflected. Old habits told me to deflect. But I was tired of the careful dance we'd been doing for weeks, tired of pretending the space between us wasn't charged with something neither of us had named. It's not just you, I said, voice quieter than I meant it to come out. He set down the sandpaper, wiped his hands on his jeans, slow like he was giving himself time to think. I need to say something and I need you to actually hear it, he said. You're Theo's friend, you're 22, I just got out of something that wrecked me pretty bad. This is not simple, any of it. I know, I said. I don't want to mess you up because I'm lonely and you're the first person who's made me feel like myself again, he continued, and his voice cracked slightly on the last part, just slightly, but I heard it. That wouldn't be fair to you. What if I don't care whether it's simple, I said. What if I just want to know if this is real for both of us and we figure out the complicated parts as we go? He looked at me for a long moment, rain hammering the roof above us, lantern light flickering slightly against his face. You scare me a little, he admitted. Not in a bad way, just I didn't expect to feel this again, not this fast, not with you. You scare me too, I said honestly. I've never told anyone what I told you in that truck, and I told you like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing to me. We were standing close by then, closer than the conversation strictly required, and there was this pull, the kind you feel in your chest before your body even decides to move. He reached out slow, giving me every chance to step back, and touched my jaw just barely, like he was asking permission with his hand instead of his words. "Tell me if this is a mistake," he said quietly, "and I'll stop right now." "It's not a mistake," I said. "Stop asking and just." He kissed me before I finished the sentence. It wasn't cinematic or perfect. Our noses bumped slightly first, and he laughed against my mouth, a short, surprised huff of breath before we adjusted and it became something slower, more certain. I remember the rain, the smell of fresh-cut wood, the lantern light, his hand shaking slightly against my jaw like he couldn't quite believe he was doing this. It didn't feel like a movie. It felt like something real, awkward at the edges, and because of that, more honest than anything I'd felt before. When we finally pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine, breathing unsteady. "I really did not plan for tonight to go like this," he said, echoing his own words from weeks earlier, and I laughed, and something in my chest that had been clenched tight for months finally loosened. I wish I could tell you everything was easy after that. It wasn't. We had to figure out how to tell Theo, who it turned out already knew and just rolled his eyes and said, "Finally, took you too long enough. I was about to charge rent for all the tension in my own house." We had to figure out how to tell his mom, which took longer, and had its own quiet, careful conversations that I won't detail here because they were hers and his to have, not mine to retell. We had to figure out what it meant that he was 26 and still healing from something that broke him, and I was 22 and had never done any of this before in the open, in real life, with someone who mattered. There were nights it got hard, nights he pulled back into himself, quiet in that old careful way, clearly thinking about Denver, about the person before me, and I had to learn not to take that personally, to just sit with him until he came back to the present. There were nights I panicked about what people at the hardware store might say if they knew, and he had to remind me patiently that I got to move at my own pace, that he wasn't going anywhere. But here's what I keep coming back to months later, telling you this now. The day he came back, I felt nothing but mild surprise and an armful of root beer I didn't know what to do with. I had no idea that Ordinary Tuesday was the quiet beginning of the realest thing that's ever happened to me. No music swelled, no lightning struck. Just a tired man walking in from a hallway, a startled laugh, and 4 years of distance that somehow, slowly, turned into the closest I've ever stood next to another person. Sometimes the biggest things in your life don't announce themselves. They just walk in, set their jacket over the back of a chair, and wait for you to notice they've changed everything. I still think about that sometimes, how close I came to not noticing at all.